Our first class in our Introduction to Orthodoxy is going to be an introduction and a church tour. And our title is an introduction to Orthodoxy. I thought perhaps the first thing we might do is just talk about the word Orthodox. So we are Orthodox Christians. This is the Orthodox Church, St. Philip Orthodox Church. And when we say Orthodox, it's good to know where the word comes from. The word actually comes from two Greek words, ortho or orthos actually, and dox, the Orthodox, and or doxa in Greek. And ortho actually means straight or correct. For instance, in the words orthodontist or orthopedics, like an orthodontist is the person that straightens out your teeth so your teeth are correct. And so the word, so orthopedics, I guess, means correct children, but that's what the word ortho means. And then we have the word doxa, where we get the dox from. So it's actually, in the Greek, it's orthodoxia, and we just say in English, orthodox. And that doxa means praise or glory, can also mean teaching. So in Greek, if you ever hear when someone makes the sign of the cross, or if they say, glory to the Father and to the Son, they say, doxa patrike io ki agio pneumati. So the first word is doxa, which means glory. And we also have, at the last part of the Matin service, before the liturgy, we have a section called the doxology, which starts with, glory to thee who has shown us the light. So that's what the word doxa, and we have that kind of shortened to dox or dox, orthodox. That's where the dox part comes from. So really the whole thing, orthodox, means the correct teaching or correct praise. Some people might also say correct worship. Praise meaning kind of the worship of God. And also, now, Orthodox doesn't have to only be referred to Orthodox Christians. It's used in other senses as well. You can have an Orthodox Jewish person. You can have someone who teaches mathematics in a kind of traditional way. They might say he's an Orthodox teacher, meaning he doesn't or she doesn't go off into strange ways or new ways to explain things, but kind of sticks to the traditional ways. And so the word Orthodox is used in other senses as well. We use it in the terms of Orthodox Christian. We are Orthodox Christians. Now, some people might say, well, why do you say Orthodox Christian? Why don't you just say Christian? And the background of that really is, in the earlier periods of the church, they probably just used the word Christian. We know the word Christian is first mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 11, where the followers of Jesus are called Christians. So a Christian is a follower of Jesus. But as the church grew in the early period, in the first centuries of the church, there were certain people who would change the teachings. We have the teachings, the basic teachings that the early Christians were teaching, and then some people started teaching other things. Like some people were saying that Jesus is not fully God. He's really human only, or the other way around. He's not fully human. He's actually divine. Different teachings about the Trinity. Is God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? Or does God sometimes appear as Father, and sometimes appear as Son, and sometimes appear as Holy Spirit? And so these wrong teachings were called heresies from the traditional Christian teaching. And so at a certain point in history, the word Orthodox started being used to refer to the foundational church that has kept the teachings of the apostles, kept the teachings of the first Christians. So we use the word Orthodox. I mean, we are Christians. There are some people, a lot of times evangelical Protestants, who would say that we are Orthodox, but they are Christians. And we would say, no, we are Christians also. We're Orthodox Christians. So Orthodox means that we follow the teachings of the first Christians, that we follow the teachings of the apostles, and it also means that we are part of a church, the Orthodox Church. Some people don't really think that's central, that being a Christian is obviously central, but being part of a church, that's an extra and maybe unnecessary burden. To say we are part of it. For us as Orthodox Christians, we can't separate really being a Christian and being part of the church. We believe and we teach, and if you read the Bible, you will see that Jesus didn't come simply to bring a new teaching to individuals, but to create the church, to create these communities. Everywhere, the people before Christianity was the Jewish people. This was a community. God works through community. And with the early Christians, it was no different. They were part of a community. That's why in the Bible we have the letter to the Romans, or the letter to the first and second letter to the Corinthians, or to the church in Ephesus, Ephesians, etc. Most of the letters in the Bible are written to church communities. We are called to be in community. So when we think of Orthodox Christian, those are the people that are baptized or chrismated, who hold the true teachings and traditions and spiritual life of the church that was handed down to us through the centuries. And another kind of thing that I read that I found was helpful, just when we think about the importance of the church. Like most Christians know, at least they should know, the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I think all Christians would say that's really important. But if you were to ask them, where does that prayer come from? Maybe they'll say it comes from the Bible, and they'd be right. And if you'd say, where in the Bible does it come? Maybe they would say it's from the Gospel according to Matthew. And if they did, they would be correct. But there's another Lord's Prayer in Luke's gospel. So the Lord's Prayer is actually mentioned twice in the Bible. It's mentioned in Matthew and it's mentioned in Luke. And they're slightly different. Pretty close, but certainly not exactly the same. Now, which one do we use? Which one actually does everybody use? And everybody uses the one that comes from Matthew. Now, if you were to ask someone, why is it that you know and say the Lord's Prayer that came out of Matthew and not Luke? I think most people wouldn't really have an answer for that. But the answer really is the church guided us to use Matthew's version in a liturgical way. So whenever we're saying kind of the official prayers, we use Matthew. That's how the church guided us into it. So people really are a product of the church and the teachings of the church. But they may also kind of feel like they don't need to belong to the church. So our talk today and for the next several weeks is about the Orthodox Christian Church and why it is important and kind of what it is, and try to answer a few questions. We say Orthodox Christian. There's a few other words, phrases that are used. Sometimes you may hear Orthodox Catholic or Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox or Antiochian Orthodox or Russian Orthodox or Romanian Orthodox or Ethiopian Orthodox, all these different ways of a name, a title for us. They all pretty much mean the same thing. Sometimes if you say Greek Orthodox or Antiochian Orthodox, it's a little bit more specific. It's kind of identifying who your bishop is, what bishop you are under. Eastern Orthodox is a phrase that's sometimes used to say that the Orthodox Church is the Church of the East that originated from the Eastern Roman Empire, as opposed to the Western Church, when we think of the Roman Catholics and the Protestants as Western. And that's fine. A lot of people will say Eastern Orthodox. It's kind of a generic term, unlike Antiochian Orthodox, which is a specific Orthodox. Eastern Orthodox, like Orthodox Christian and Orthodox Catholic, would refer to all Orthodox. Some people don't really like, though, Eastern Orthodox because it may imply that it works better in the East, but we're in the West. So, and some people just say Orthodox. I'm Orthodox. Some people say Orthodox Catholic. I like Orthodox Christian, actually. Orthodox Catholic, while true, we say it even in the Creed, we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, not Roman Catholic, but Catholic meaning universal for all people. So we are, it is a traditional way of saying it, Orthodox Catholic, but I think Orthodox Catholic can be confusing to someone who doesn't know the lingo. And Eastern Orthodox, we're not Eastern, or it's not just people of the East that it's for. Antiochian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or whatever one's background, we're Antiochian Orthodox, which is fine, but it also can be confusing. I know every time I say Antiochian Orthodox, people say, what's that? Now, Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox tend to be the most common names that people may recognize. So sometimes I'll say, have you heard of the Greek Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox? It's like that, but We're Antiochian Orthodox. Or sometimes people just say Orthodox. But when we say Orthodox only, and that's fine to say if you're with other Orthodox people, but some people don't even realize we're Christians. So I like to say we're Orthodox Christian, and then they know we're not Orthodox Jewish or something else like that. So it just helps identify a little better. I wanted to talk about the church itself. So this is a diagram of the church. This looks actually a lot like our church, and most Orthodox churches look somewhat similar. And mainly there are three parts to the church. We have the part in the back of the church, which is called the narthex. We have the main body of the church where the people are, which is called the nave. And then we have this area of the church, which most people call the altar. It would also be called the sanctuary. And so this actually describes our church very well. In this diagram, it says choir over here, but actually our choir, well, we kind of have our choir actually on this side, our chanters, and we also have our choir above the narthex in the choir loft. There's a little table over here called the table of oblation, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. As I mentioned, the whole area is called oftentimes the altar, and then in the middle of the altar, the central kind of piece of furniture in the altar would be the altar table. And just for the future, whenever you're writing the word altar or spelling the word altar, in this context of the altar in the church, or the altar of our hearts, we might say, it's spelled with an A at the end, A-L-T-A-R. A lot of people, when they write the word altar, they spell it A-L-T-E-R. A-L-T-E-R means to change something, to alter it, like I'm going to alter the hem of my pants or something, or you bring your clothes in for altering. That's the ER, which means to change. But the altar table or the altar is with an A. So it's called the altar, but maybe a better word is sanctuary. They're both fine words, but when you say sanctuary, maybe it's a little bit less confusing because there's the altar, and then sometimes we call the altar table the altar also. So if you want to say the sanctuary and the altar table. In the back of the apse, this curved part, we call it the high place. And let's look a little bit more specifically at that. So this is the narthex now. I took some pictures so I could share them with you and we can look at it. This is a typical narthex. You see an area where there are some candles and some candle stands where people can put their candles. We use candles a lot in the church. We have candle stands and ability to get or purchase candles. Usually when an Orthodox Christian enters the church, they may light a candle and say a prayer and put the candle in the sand. These stands are filled with sand, so the candles just stay in them and stay up straight. When we say a prayer, it might be praying for some intention, something on our heart that we want to pray for, or your children, or friends, or family, or anything you want. Candles have always had an important place in the church. The reason comes from the first chapter of John's Gospel, where we read that Christ is the light of the world. And we light candles in remembrance of this to become part of this life, part of the light. Life cannot exist on earth without light, and we can't exist without the spiritual light. We also remember in the book of Genesis, when God begins creation, he says, "Let there be light." And he separated it from the darkness. The light of the candle pushes away darkness. Saint Porphyrio says, when we are struggling with our sins, don't focus so much on the sins as we're trying to overcome them. Focus more on the light, on Christ. And if we fill ourselves with light, it will push away the darkness. So we have all these things in mind when we're lighting a candle. If not consciously, everyone in turn, it's just part of what we mean when we're using a candle. And as the candle is there lit, it represents our prayer that is staying there in the presence of God as well. We use candles a lot. We use candles in the narthex. We use candles in the main part of the church, in the nave. We use them in the altar, the sanctuary area. At every wedding, we use candles. At baptisms, we use candles. At funerals, we use candles. It is part of the service. In addition to just lighting candles, the candles on the iconostasis and the candles in the church, in all these services, there are candles that are held, or some important candle. And perhaps the biggest use of the candle is the Feast of the Resurrection, Pascha, when the priest comes out with the lit candle, the large candle, and says, "Come receive light from the light never overtaken by night. Come and glorify Christ risen from the dead." So this is kind of something typical you'd see in the narthex, an area for candles, to get the candles and to place the candles. In a lot of times in the narthex, you will also see the font for baptisms, as we have in our narthex. We also have an icon of the baptism over there, and we place our holy water container back there, so it's all kind of consistent with the baptism. And the other side of the narthex is the entrance into the church. And oftentimes you will see icons as we enter the church. Now we have these icons of the Theotokos and the Lord. And then in the middle we have, as we enter the church, we have this icon stand as well. Usually when we come into the church, we venerate the icons. You can venerate all the icons. You can venerate some of the icons. At least make sure you're venerating or kissing one of the icons of Christ, and probably more. In the church, as you enter the church, as you leave the narthex and enter the church, you will see this icon stand. And oftentimes I have an icon of Christ on the right side, and St. Philip on the left, and the gospel book in the middle. Not every church has it just like this. So it might not look just like this with these icons in the narthex and then these icons here, but this is how it has been at St. Philip's. Every church might have it a little bit differently, but you usually see icons as you enter the church. You usually have something with Jesus and Mary, and then usually have the feasts, if there's any feasts going on at the time. So when it was Pascha time, I'd replace these icons with the icon of the resurrection and maybe the gospel reading, the Samaritan woman, or the healing of the paralytic, or something like that. So a lot of times with these icons up front, I try to have an icon that is reflecting the theme of the day. When I don't have a particular change in icons to do, I'll usually have Jesus and the Apostle Philip. As we continue our walk into the church, we get a little closer to the iconostas. And we can see here we have this is called the iconostas. This is all part of the nave where the people are. Between the iconostas and where the people are, this area here, really the whole area, not just the steps, but kind of from the carpet up to the iconostas, is called the solea. The solea is part of the nave. It's where weddings take place. It's where the sermon is given. This is the solea. Now, in our church, we have pews, as you can see here. In some churches, they don't have pews. They just have it would just be carpet or tile or wood and maybe some carpets on the floor, but we have pews. On the right side, in many churches, is the bishop's chair or the bishop's throne. That's what this chair is. Sometimes it can be big, like 8 feet tall or something, with a large icon of Christ in the back of it. So nobody sits in this chair except when the bishop is here. That's the bishop's chair. And when I sense the iconostasis with the censer that has the incense in it, I always start with the throne. 3 senses to the throne, then 3 to Christ, 3 to the Theotokos, and then I sense the rest. But we always start with the throne as remembering that we are under the bishop. And even though the bishop's not here, we are remembering the bishop. And on the left side is a table that we use for our memorials. If it's a wedding, then we bring the table to the center. We would use the table in the center. I think from now on, we'll probably just do the memorials over here. The cross this is the cross we use during Holy Week, and when it's not Holy Week now, we just kind of keep it there. Some churches, they keep the cross in the sanctuary itself or behind the altar table. But it's a little difficult for us to keep it behind the altar table because we have icons behind the altar table, and I don't want the cross to block the other icons. So here you are, just a closer view of the altar, the iconostasis. So on the iconostasis, we usually have to the usually the churches are facing east. So the altar sanctuary area is on the east side. The narthex is on the west side, which would mean that the side on the left of the picture would be the north side, and the side to the right side of this picture would be the south side. Sometimes we use that terminology too. So on the south side of the iconostasis, right of center in this picture, next to the holy doors, we have the icon of Christ. And this is common. This is how it is in every church. On the other side, you would have Mary holding baby Jesus. So some people sometimes we look at this as, the icon of Mary or the Theotokos and the icon of Jesus. But I like to look at it as this is the icon of the first coming, and this is the icon of the second coming, Jesus in his glory. And we are found in the middle between his first coming and his second coming. Now on the side next to Jesus is John the Baptist, and next to Mary and Jesus is the patron saint of the church. So because our church is St. Philip, we have an icon of the Apostle Philip here. If this was the church of St. George, then we'd have an icon of St. George here. If it was the church of Mary Magdalene, St. Mary Magdalene, then that's the icon we would have here. So whatever icon is in this spot is the patron of that community. Then we have the doors after those icons. These are called the deacon doors because the deacons use them to go in and out of the altar. Also, the altar servers use them to go in and out of the altar as well. But a lot of times they're called the deacon doors. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes you'll see the archangels Michael and Gabriel on the deacon doors. Sometimes they have, rather than Michael and Gabriel, they'll have deacons on those doors, like St. Stephen the deacon and or other deacons. In our church we have the archangels. And then here we have St. Ignatius of Antioch, and on the other side we have St. Zechariah, who is the father of John the Baptist. Now, these four, Jesus, John the Baptist, Mary and Jesus, and the patron of the church, are going to be the same in every church. Then once you pass those, there is a bit more variety. Sometimes the iconostas is even bigger, and there's more saints, and they'll have other saints there. And we have on the walls here Constantine and Helen and St. Demetrius further on, and we have the prophet Elijah and Elisha on this side, and St. George over here, and we have some more saints above them. Above these central icons here, we have great feasts of the church. And major events in the life of Christ. So there are actually 12 great feasts, and we have more than 12 icons here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 16. So there's 16 altogether. So these are the great feasts plus a couple more. For instance, this is the humility of Christ, which is not a great feast, but it's kind of one of the main icons of Holy Week. So we have a few icons here that are not part of the main feasts, but are still very important. And above them, these are icons of the apostles, the 12 apostles, plus some of the other early followers of Christ. And above us, we are still in the nave, is the dome. So this is kind of the dome here in our church with a chandelier coming from it. And over here on the left side of the picture, we have just the same picture. Actually, it's just zoomed in a bit. So we usually have an icon of Christ in the dome. Rather than having tall spires like traditional Protestant churches may, kind of reaching out towards a distant God. In our church, we have domes. And in the dome, we have the icon of Christ. Because when we are in worship, we have been lifted up into the kingdom of heaven. We're not so much reaching out to a distant Christ, but we are in the presence of Christ. Christ is with us. He is in our midst. And so this is the feeling we have in the church. Not that Christ is so distant from us, but that he is present with us. I mentioned our churches are facing east. Jesus said that like the sun rises in the east and like lightning shines from the east to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. So in his second coming, when he comes again in his glory, symbolically in the scriptures, he mentions coming from the east. So we always orient our churches towards the east. Now, if a community buys a pre-existing church that wasn't built as an Orthodox church, it might not be facing the east. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. But if we're going to build a church, then we have it oriented toward the east. And just regarding the icons again and the iconostasis, this whole structure here is called the iconostasis, which literally means icon stand. Stasis is stand in Greek. The iconostasis. Icons are meant to show both the physical aspect of a person as well as a spiritual aspect of a person. They are not meant to look exactly like they would if it was strictly physical. So if we had a photograph, for instance, of Jesus, we wouldn't want to use the photograph in the dome or a photograph on the iconostas. And if our church was, let's say, St. Paisios, and we do have photographs of St. Paisios, still we want to use an icon of St. Paisios and not a photograph. The icons show something different. In icons, we do not see shadows. For instance, when you see a picture, a photograph, a painting, any type of picture, usually there is a light source. If the sun is on one side, or the light source is on one side, then on the opposite side, you're going to see a shadow. Just like I have a I have a light over here. So on this side is the light, and that side is the shadow. But in icons, the light source is actually within. It's not an external light source. It's an internal light source. So we don't see the shadows like you might see in a realistic painting. A lot of times the nose is drawn long because it represents that they are a sweet fragrance to God. Oftentimes the hands are made larger because to show that they have done good works for the Lord. Icons also have titles on them. Now, this icon of Jesus has more titles than most because it's of Christ, but you can see here it tells you who it is. This ICXC means Jesus Christ. That's the abbreviation for Isus Christos in Greek, Jesus Christ. And in most icons have the halo around them, but Jesus's icon has the halo plus a cross within the halo. And so anytime you see an icon with a cross in the halo, that's an icon of Jesus. He's the only one that has that. And in the cross, it'll say, O, on. So this is actually two words. This is the first word, the O. And then the omega N is the second word, O, on, which means the one who is, or the being, which is really what it says at the end of the dismissal when I say, Christ our God, he who is. In the Greek, it would say, Christ our God, o on, the one who is, he who is. So that's what this is, the one who has being. And then here it says, o, which is an article meaning the, Pantocrator, which means the all ruler or all ruling, or sometimes it's translated almighty. So the one who rules over all. So this is the icon. We call this icon, the name of this style of icon is called the Pantocrator. It's usually the icon of Christ Pantocrator that is in the dome. And we see here, let's see where this starts. So here is where there's a sentence written all around the Pantocrator. And you can see this when you go to church and stand under the dome and look up. Not right under the dome, because if you're right in the middle, you'll be right under the chandelier and you can't see anything. So you have to go to the side a little bit. And it'll say, I am the Alpha and Omega, which is from the book of Revelation. Beginning and end. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. So beginning and end. The being, which is the oon. He who is. The begotten, says the Lord Pantocrator, says the Lord Almighty. So that's what we have in the dome. Jesus is with us. And we are not reaching out to a distant God, but we are in the presence of God. So here we are now. We've left the nave. We moved on to the altar or the sanctuary. In the sanctuary, you have the altar table, You have the prothesis table, and we have another table here, which is the sacristy table, or the table for the altar servers. They put some like supplies up there, like candles and charcoal and the hot water that we use before communion, and the censer and different things like that. But liturgically, the altar table and the prothesis table are used, and you'd see that in every church. You might not see this, or there might be a room to the side where they do that as well. And this is just another view of the altar, a more portrait vertical view, so you can see above the altar. Usually behind the altar there is an icon of Mary with Jesus. This icon is called the platitera, the one who fills heaven, and she is usually shown in the apse of the icon, in a way joining Christ in the dome to us below. She is, so sometimes this is very large and even goes to the floor and goes even higher. She is the way that Jesus came to be with us. He came through the Virgin Mary. We also have in our altar, behind the altar, at the back side of the sanctuary, in the apse, we have Jesus here. And this is not the best way to look at it because it's just straight on, but it's Jesus at the altar table with communion. And to his left and right, there are different saints. So we have Saint Gregory the Ologos, Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Basil the Great, and Saint James, the brother of the Lord. These four saints are recognized for divine liturgies. So we have the liturgy of John Chrysostom that we do most Sundays, Basil the Great that we do during Lent on Sundays. James, there is a liturgy of James that we rarely do, and Gregory the Ologos is associated with the pre-sanctified liturgy that we do during weekdays in Great Lent. On the altar table, we have just a few things. We have the gospel book. We have a vigil light, which is right here. We have the cross. And we have behind it the tabernacle. We also have on our altar table some relics of St. Raphael of Brooklyn. And I think I can get a little closer here. So again, this is that same picture, just zoomed in a little bit. Here's our gospel. The relics are in here. Many churches may not have any relics there, but we do, and I put them on the altar. The vigil light and the tabernacle. In the tabernacle, I have reserved sacrament. I have Holy Communion that is used when I visit the sick. When I visit the sick, or if it's a baptism during the week and it's not connected to liturgy, then I will give them communion from the reserve sacrament, from this and this is communion that has been consecrated at Divine Liturgy on Holy Thursday, I dry it out, and then I put it in this little container. And then I bring it to those in the hospital and things like that. So that's what's in the tabernacle. On that side altar I showed before, over here on the left of this picture, is the prothesis table. And so here's the prothesis table a little closer up. And then this is zoomed in to what we see on the prothesis table. We have the chalice and the chalice, and this is called the discos, 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 which really can be translated, I guess, as plate, but I like discos better than plate. It sounds better. And I also have on here the covers that we use during the Divine Liturgy. And this piece, which is called the asterisk or the star, it opens up when the cloths are off of the discos. We put the lamb, the bread that will be used for communion, on the dish. And then I open this up, the asterisk, put it on top, and then I put the cloth over it. So by putting this on top of the bread, it protects the bread when I put the cloth on top, so the cloth doesn't touch the bread. And then there's two cloths here. This one and then another small one underneath it. One goes on the discos and one goes over the chalice. And later on, when we are in the Divine Liturgy, this larger cloth will go over both of them. You also see on the prothesis table we have some wine and water and candles and a cloth that we use at communion. So that brings me to the end of our presentation for today. I guess I could mention also that the royal doors or the holy doors usually have the icon of the Annunciation on that door. And actually, if I go back a moment, behind the prothesis table, we usually have the icon of Christmas, the Nativity of Christ. It's at Christmas where Christ came into the world, and it's also at the prothesis table that we prepare the bread and wine, which is Christ coming to us in Holy Communion. So I'm going to stop here, and we will come back next week, with the history of the Orthodox Church. And please don't think that we're going to do all of the history of the Orthodox Church within 1 hour, but I'll try to give a little outline of that.